Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Voters returned to the polls this week to finish some business from the March primaries. One of the races is for the Republican nomination for state auditor. It's a position that gained lots of attention last year when Democrat Beth Wood resigned after an investigation into her driving habits. David Boliek and Jack Clark face each other in the GOP primary runoff. The winner will face Democrat Jessica Holmes in November. WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht has been following the race, and he joins us now. Paul, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
Paul, the state auditor race hasn't typically received the same kind of attention as, say, the governor's race or congressional seats, but it's a pretty important role. What does the auditor do?
Right. It's a watchdog role where the person in office audits. They have the authority to audit a number of state agencies and municipal governments, and they do that, and they look for inefficiencies and try to save the taxpayers' money. You know, and most states, the auditor is not elected. North Carolina is one of only 19 states where the state auditor is on the ballot, and you get to pick who you want.
And they also look out for malfeasance and corruption, right?
That's right, and that's when they receive the most press. It's not when they find a missing eye, a missing dot over an I, or something like that. It's when they find a city councilor who's been siphoning off money somewhere. That's when you see them in the news.
Now, this race has gotten some attention in that, for once, there's actually some competition, right?
That's right. Beth Wood is a Democrat who's actually held the office since 2009, so about 16 years. But a couple of years ago, she was at the center of a scandal that started with a hit and run in downtown Raleigh. People were asking lots of questions about it. She dodged most of those questions. People probably saw this on the news, on our site, WRAL. And then after an investigation, it came to light that she was actually using state vehicles for personal errands. And so she resigned last year.
That's right. So Democratic Governor Roy Cooper had to fill the position, and he did that with Jessica Holmes. She's a Democrat, and she's been in the position since December. So now Republicans see an opening in November, and there was this crowded field for the nomination in March, and two candidates emerged. Tell us about them.
That's right. There were 6 candidates, and Jack Clark and Dave Boliek emerged from that field with 23% and 22% of the vote, respectively. Now you need 30% to secure a party nomination. Boliek is a former prosecutor, and now he serves on the UNC Board of Trustees. Meanwhile, Jack Clark, he is a CPA, a certified public accountant, and he's an assistant over at a research assistant, I should say, over at the state legislature. He works for State Representative Kyle Hall, who chairs the Appropriations Committee.
Let's take a break here. When we come back, we'll hear more about the candidates for state auditor and other runoffs on Tuesday's ballot. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht about Tuesday's runoff elections. Paul, in the GOP primary for auditor, there's been a debate between the candidates over experience. One has been an auditor, one hasn't. Why is that significant?
Well, because Clark, who is a CPA, says he believes that professional licensure is absolutely necessary to do the job well. Beth Wood, who held the office for 16 years, she's a CPA. He says that this office is full of auditors, and to sort of understand what they do on a daily basis, you need to also have that experience and to be able to think like them and to coach them. Meanwhile, Boliek says, he ran a business once upon a time and is a partner in his law firm, and says, hey, I've had the view from the top in that experience, and I know how to balance a budget. I know how to look through financials. And at UNC, I found that they were on the verge of spending $100 million more than their budget showed that they had. And he'll point out, he said, we found that on the UNC Board of Trustees. Beth Wood did not find that. You did not need to be a CPA. You did not need auditing experience to find sort of this $100 million deficit, as he put it.
And he has some investigative experience as a former prosecutor. Now, does one need to have auditing experience to be the state auditor?
Not in North Carolina, no. But in some other states, yes. In 12 states, the state auditor is required to be a CPA. In North Carolina last year, a handful of Republicans introduced a bill that would have enacted that same requirement. Here, it didn't really go anywhere. So at the moment, you do not need any sort of professional license or to be a CPA or anything like that to be state auditor.
Now, you wrote about Beth Wood many months ago, and as you mentioned, she's a CPA and was in the role for almost 2 decades. She was a Democrat who earned a lot of respect on both sides of the aisle. How did she build that respect?
Well, she did that by investigating offices that were run by politicians from both sides of the aisle. She did an audit of the Agriculture Department. That's run by Steve Troxler. He's a big Republican. People have known him forever, it seems. And then she's investigated city councils across eastern North Carolina, western North Carolina that are majority Democrat and found a misuse of city funds, of taxpayer money. And so she's gone out there and proven that she's not pulling any punches. At the same time, we rarely saw Beth Wood ever go out on the campaign trail and talk about the issues of the day that aren't related to the office. Like, she's a Democrat. I can't remember a time I ever heard her talk about abortion or gun control or any of those social issues that aren't related to her actual job.
Now, as we've discussed, Wood was charged with using state vehicle for personal errands. That's the kind of thing that the auditor is supposed to investigate, not usually the subject of that kind of investigation. Whoever wins this race is going to have to try to rebuild some faith in the office. Is anyone proposing how they do that?
Clark says that his campaign style now is an attempt to do that. Clark, he is not vowing to audit any sort of department. Boliek says he wants to get in there and audit the DMV immediately. That's a very populist idea. People hate their experience with the DMV, or they talk about it at least. The ones who maybe have a decent opinion of it aren't the ones speaking up. And Boliek says that he wants to also audit elections. And Clark's response to that is, hey, if you forecast what you want to do, you're putting a target on those people's backs and making them look like bad guys. Not only could that make you look biased as an auditor, but it can make your job harder. When you get in there, these people know that you're going to audit their materials. They might work against your audit. They might try to compromise it in some way. So he just thinks that's a bad idea.
And why does Boliek think it's a good idea to investigate those two agencies?
Well, he sees it as an effort to restore the public's trust and to say, hey, I hear you. You have complaints about the DMV? I'll do something about that. You don't completely trust our elections? Let me look into it for you. It's more of a customer service thinking on his part.
And that's also a big Republican issue, and that makes sense going into a GOP primary, right?
Right. And we should point out here that the auditor has the legal authority to audit the State Board of Elections as an agency. It does not have the legal authority to go in and start, filing through ballots and voter equipment and things like that.
Now, you spoke with some political scientists. Do any of them have any predictions for Tuesday?
They say it's too hard to predict. Both of these guys are running for the first time. It's a statewide race. There's no polling on it to speak of. Boliek raised a lot of money. He outraised Clark by nearly $500,000. Clark had spent about $10,000 on his campaign and came in first in the March primary. Boliek spent about $400,000 and came in second. So they say, Boliek has all this money. He is outraised Clark, but obviously the first time around that didn't mean, that wasn't everything. That didn't mean much.
And turnout is going to be a real factor here too, right?
That's right. The political experts say, only the most engaged Republicans tend to show up for Republican primary runoffs. Boliek has all that money, but one thing that he may struggle with, he was a registered Democrat until last year. Now, he says he's always been conservative. He claims to be like many voters in North Carolina in that, he registered one way but has voted a different way throughout his life. He says it's not a problem. Clark says, hey, maybe one reason he's putting all of his political ideas at the forefront of his campaign, Boliek, is because he's having to compensate for his years of being a Democrat. Who knows what the voters think of it? I guess we'll see.
Now, there are a couple other GOP primaries on the ballot Tuesday. What else is in store?
That's right. Here in the Triangle, we have a runoff for the Republican nomination in the 13th Congressional District. That's between Kelly Daughtry of Johnston County and Brad Knott of Wake County. Now, here's another case where money did not win the day. Daughtry raised millions, spent millions of her own money on this campaign, but recently stopped her campaign and endorsed Knott. She said that after former President Donald Trump came in and endorsed Knott, she didn't really have much of a path to victory.
So that one's basically decided, and then there's also the lieutenant governor's race, right?
That's right. The current lieutenant governor, Mark Robinson, is running for governor. He's the Republican nominee in that race. So that obviously leaves a vacancy. And the candidates for the Republican nomination are Hal Weatherman. He's the former chief of staff for former Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest. And then you have Jim O'Neill, who's the district attorney in Forsyth County. Now, he ran for attorney general back in 2020 and came this close, like 14,000 votes shy of beating Attorney General Josh Stein.
Well, I know that you're going to be on top of all of those races Tuesday. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht for his article on the state auditor's race, which includes details on where and how to vote on Tuesday and who's eligible. Go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.